All right, good people. I know it's hard to believe, but we are at episode number 6 of Wednesday Wisdom with yours truly, Mazi Mutafa. Proceed at your own risk as I share lessons from the last 23 years of being a nonprofit executive, offering what has worked for me while inviting you to take only what resonates. The show is about engaging peers and community members in conversation that helps us change the world for the better. So before I dive in, please subscribe, like, and if you live in the DMV and you're a teaching artist seeking more work, leave a comment so we can connect. Today's topic is called Doing Too Much. And it's inspired in part by conversations I've been having with my team, especially as we prepare for the next fiscal year. Our fiscal year starts in September, September 1 to August 31. So we're in the midst of wrapping up the things that we had to do this year. And so that leads us to start thinking about next year. And I want to encourage you to do a few things as you begin to think about how you prioritize the future. The first is to think about how you prioritize choosing strategic yeses and powerful nos. In a previous episode, I talked about a good friend of mine named Retta Morris, who at the time worked in the mayor's office, who reached out to me with a life changing call to be able to accept resources to be able to respond to a crime emergency. That was a life changing yes. And it was right. At the time, we were operating a program as volunteers, and she provided the resources to make it possible for us to go from being a once a month volunteer operation to a 6 day a week summer program in a community that needed a resource. Another example would be accepting the passing of the baton from one of my friends and brothers, Dominic Painter, who at the time was running a nonprofit called the Midnight Forum. And he created an initiative called Murals DC in collaboration with a city council member. And he was planning to leave the DC area to move to LA, and he wanted to ask Words Beats in Life to take the baton and manage Murals DC. That was, again, uh, a life changing, strategic yes that allowed us to become more deeply invested and involved in the creation of public art in our city. It's important for you as an entrepreneur to be thinking about what are the kind of yeses that will change the way you do the work you do for the better, adding more meaning and depth to your efforts at being change agents, promoting community and individual transformation. And what are the no's that you have to say because they will divert you from your core mission, your priorities, et cetera? Again, in a previous episode, I talked about not being so wedded to why you were founded that you don't take opportunities to explore. But some exploration is a total waste of time. And so you got to be able to tell the difference between something that's going to be a transformational yes and a powerful no that you will not regret when you see someone else say yes to that thing. One of the things I'd also encourage you to think about is, as we talk about this topic of doing too much, is the constant need to be on during what is commonly referred to as, while you participate in what is commonly conferred, while you participate in what is commonly referred to as hustle culture. I think that it's really important to understand the difference between having a job and having a purpose. That having a job or even owning a business and having a purpose. That if Words Beats in Life disappeared tomorrow, the work that I do through Words Beats in Life would still be my purpose. I wouldn't suddenly move in a completely different direction. So that this is just a vehicle to be able to accomplish the things that I believe are necessary in the world that have allowed me to gather other people who feel similarly about those particular things so that we can work together. Um, One of the things I've always said is to every young person, particularly that I meet or young entrepreneur, is your responsibility is not to find people that agree with you about everything. Your responsibility is to find people who are willing to work with you on the things you agree about. Does that mean that sometimes I'm collaborating with people who I might disagree with about a bunch of things? Yeah, that's part of the process. There are very few people who you're going to find in your life or organizations or companies or brands that you agree with them about everything. Every single decision that they made, you agree with it. Good luck if like that's a great way to work alone if that becomes your standard. But you also got to be clear with people who ask, well, why are you working with such and such? Or why are you collaborating with such and such? And the answer is because this is a thing that we both believe would actually make the world better. And so we're going to work on that thing. And that other stuff we don't agree with them about, we don't work with them on that. It doesn't mean that that work isn't valuable. It's valuable to them. And so let's work on the things that we agree about, that we both recognize as valuable, or the community recognizes as valuable. I also want to encourage you to prioritize rest and understanding that pouring from an empty cup literally does not work. An empty cup has nothing in it but oxygen or carbon dioxide or dust for you to pour from. And if you're trying to pour water, you need water to be able to pour water. Um, it's important as you think about building the kind of programmatic menu that you're offering as a business or a program or an initiative, to really be aware of what other people are doing. So when we founded Words Beats in Life way back in 2002, um, before that process, myself, Steve Legerfo, and Kaniko Abdul Malik met up on several Saturdays at the Maya Angelou Public Charter School to really do research together and to also devise a plan for what this organization was going to be before we did it. And the way we did that was, we didn't just sit around and brainstorm about all the things it could be. We looked at what was already there. What were people already doing in DC and in the Eastern region or around the country or even around the world that was worth paying attention to? And all of that research, almost all that research, was done digitally. We looked at people's websites. We looked at videos that were available online. We looked for interviews that people had done to be able to get a sense of the not just what people were doing, but the why they were doing it. And this was really critical, because if we were going to add value, we needed to know what was already there, rather than assuming that we brought all the value to this community or to this way of promoting arts education through hip hop. One of the things we found in doing that research was the overwhelming majority of people that were hip hop organizations were focused on rap music. And at the time, we thought that we didn't know very many rappers who came from youth development programs. That most of the rappers who we were aware of uh, had access to studios in their communities, or made mixtapes, or they got access to the tools and the opportunities without a youth development organization, and we hadn't seen any to come from other nonprofits. Now I'll be honest, that's not true anymore. 23 years later, there are amazing MCs like G-Eazy that came from Beats Rhymes in Life, which is a hip hop therapy, a rap therapy program based in Oakland, and now also has offices in Boston. We've had amazing alumni like Kamal, who is a vocalist and a musician, who came from our program. But at the time, we didn't see, artists that were blowing up on uh, MTV or BET or any place else on television that had come from a program like this. So we decided, instead of focusing on rap music, we would focus on the other elements of hip hop. Now, being able to see that everybody was focused on rap music made it really easy to make a decision to pivot. But if we hadn't done that, we might have done like everybody else and just created a rap program. And not to say that there's anything wrong with creating rap programs, but it's about saying, what are you going to add to it? Like, one of my favorite sayings, and it's just a Maziism, is that the world is a black mall. Like, if you go to a mall in many black communities, there are several of the same thing. Like, I don't know why PG Plaza has 5 tennis shoe stores, but it does. And I know the answer is literally people want to be able to get different kinds of tennis shoes, but we didn't want to be enough. We didn't want to be the fifth store. We wanted to be a store that was adding something different, but still have value to the community that we wanted to serve. And I think it's going to be really important for you, as a person that's creating a project or a program or initiative, to be thinking about, what are you doing? What are you creating that's going to be adding value, as opposed to being a replication of something that already exists? Um, there's a few ways now that you can be able to do this kind of competitive analysis of what else is happening out there. You have access to Instagram. You have access to TikTok. You can go, and you have access to YouTube, clearly, where you can go and do research on organizations or initiatives or projects like the thing that you want to do, and see what people say about them. See what the audience looks like at those events. Look at what kind of artists they're able to afford with the budget they have. And this can inform how it is you think about devising a plan for how you move forward. This is the spy version of of data collection. But you also can read their newsletters. Like most businesses, whether for profit or nonprofit, produce newsletters that they send out to people that pay attention to what they do to keep them informed. So, one of the things you can do as a future either competitor or cooperator, someone who's going to cooperate with them in doing the thing that you want to do, is look at what they say about themselves. Look at how they describe their goals. Look at who's supporting their work because this is all information that most organizations and companies make available to the general public because we celebrate the people that are our partners, are invested in our work, and we want people to know that they're a part of it. So you being able to have access to that information is readily available by doing something as simple as subscribing to a newsletter. If you're a younger generation, you might be like, newsletters, they suck. But it's how you're going to collect data. It's one way. You can also, if you really feel like doing a deep dive, you can look at people's annual reports where they list their accomplishments, the kind of money that they had to spend on things, and who their partners were. This is another tool as you think about the research you need to do to inform what it is you're going to do. Um, One of the things that people rarely do, I continue to be surprised that most people have not heard of this. Have you ever heard of of an informational interview by show of hands or comments in the chat? An informational interview is something that you can do with almost any company that you're interested in, where you reach out and say, "Hello, my name is Mazi Mutafa. I'm really loving the work that you're doing over at XYZ Corporation, and I see that you don't have any current positions available, but I would love to schedule an informational interview to come in to learn more about your company and share more about me." Now, you can do this not just because you want a job, but just because you want to learn more about the company. Most companies are more than happy to tell their story, explain who it is that they are and what they are trying to do to whoever's willing to listen, especially someone who's potentially interested in either being a collaborator in the future or a worker in the future. So, understanding that you can be looking at social media, you can be getting the information that people publish about themselves and their work, but you can also go as far as to just request an informational interview where they sit down to meet with you. If you have a social media channel, you could also think about reaching out to people to do an interview with them. I host a weekly radio show. So a lot of the people that I'm interested in partnering with, I reach out to and ask them to be a part of my show so that I can ask them all the questions that I have about the whys, the whats, the whens, the hows of their work to determine for myself if I feel like this is a kind of person or company that I would like to work with. Does that make sense to everybody? I hope it does. Um, One of the reasons why I encourage people to do the research is because there's a difference between copying and informing your own process. Like a great example is we host an event called Scratch, Sip, and Paint. Why do we do that? Well, we were trying to come up with an event for Valentine's Day that felt like it was hip hop and appealing and had a market. And at that time, I want to say 6 or 7 years ago, um, sip and paints were one of the biggest things happening around the country, but especially here in Washington D.C. And so we were like, well, we could just do a straight sip and paint where we're just taking an idea, but instead of doing a brush-based painting activity, we can use aerosol paint. But we said, but we also have all this other stuff. So what if we added another element that made it uniquely ours? So we added a scratch, meaning DJing, sip and paint, so that people would come into our space and participate in a DJ workshop, sip a little wine or some non-alcoholic beverage if that was their choice, and then go outside to paint. The first time we did that, we weren't sure whether or not it would be well received. The first Valentine's Day we did that, we sold out, I want to say like 40 tickets 3 times on the same day. I was like, oh, we might actually have something here. The people are actually interested in this thing that we weren't sure about that was rooted in a larger community of people that like to go out and have some libations with their painting and then added a DJ element to it. And now, we do that, but we also do just straight DJ workshops and graffiti workshops. So the people that don't necessarily want the liquor or the non-alcoholic beverage still get that kind of culture-based experience where they're going to be able to do hands-on activities, but also learn about something that actually matters to them. Each of those things are inspired by just looking at a landscape of what kind of experiences are people willing to sign up for, and what is true to us, and what it is that we want to do. Um, it's also very true looking at things like the mixologist workshops that happened during COVID, inspired us to create something that we called scratch and sip, where we paired a turntablist with a mixologist, where the mixologist is mixing a drink while the turntablist is spinning records. Again, looking at something that already exists and saying, well, how could we put a spin on it that makes it our own? So we're not just copying, we're really remixing something that already exists. I would also say another way to determine what it is you should be doing is to show up at other people's things. I'm kind of notorious for this. I go to other people's events, especially when they're at venues that I've not done an event at yet, because I want to see the lighting. I want to see the stage. I want to hear the sound. I want to look at the way they're engaging audience so that it inspires me to think about, well, if I was going to do this, even this same event, how would I do it differently? How would I make it our own? Um, how can I not just jack this idea, but actually remix it so that it feels like the kind of thing that a Words Beats in Life would do as opposed to a X, Y, and Z company? And you can't, I mean, you literally could try to do that by watching it online or reading a newsletter, but there's nothing like showing up in a space and feeling the vibe. Doing an energy check, seeing who else is there. There might be people that are a part of your already existing community or base that you're marketing to that are there, and being able to talk to them about like how they're enjoying the event informs how you might think about the future thing you want to do. And I say this because as you're thinking about the things you want to do, some of it is theoretical, some of it is brain work, some of it is actually just social, like actually going out in the world and interacting with people and thinking through what you like about the things that you're experiencing and what you don't. Like I love to go to the amusement park to stand in line, and my wife hates standing in line. But the reason why I really appreciate that is because one, it tells me that the thing that I'm about to participate in, lots of people want to do. And in order to do it, I have to have a level of patience. There's an opportunity for me to sit and reflect, talk to my wife, or look through my phone. And I value all those things as a part of the process. Some people, if they see a line, they keep it moving. They're not even remotely interested in participating. And so understanding the kind of psychology of participation, not just the psychology of presenting, I think is really important if you're going to be a person that does events or activities that you want people to show up to. One of the things about those kinds of two different perspective of guest versus producer is that a lot of times when you're producing, other producers are going to be your guests. And so being able to talk to them about the things that they're enjoying or not enjoying, the things that they would do differently, gives you not only the vantage point of a guest, but a guest who actually does things like this, which is ideally, if you have a relationship with that person, is going to help you further along the line. I cannot tell you how many people have chosen to partner with Words Beats in Life after coming to something that they said, I think we could actually add to this thing if we were a partner in this, and making room for people to be able to add value to the things you do is critical, especially if you're going to be in a community space as opposed to a corporate space. But the truth is, even in a corporate space, there's value to thinking about how it is that people can add to the things that you're doing with the expertise, with the relationships, with the networks that they bring to the table. So again, I talked about the competitive analysis you can do virtually through the means that I described, or in person with that informational interview. The difference between copying and learning best practices that you can enhance with your own spin on it. And then I just got done talking about the power of in-person observation. Now, using research to identify gaps and opportunities in your field is going to be the work. Like being able to do evaluations where people can tell you what they liked and what they didn't like, being able to be present at the things that you're producing so that you have real time experiences to be able to draw on for as you think about how you want to improve this thing. I was literally just talking to my marketing director today about a decision, and I was talking to him about this in part because I was thinking about this show and making some decisions about events that we've done that were really well attended. And he gave me great metaphors. He talked about Woodstock as an example, which is something that predates me and probably everybody that's watching this. But that there were at least three kinds of experience. There was the organizer's experience of really crappy logistics and rain and issues with sound, and then there was a guest perspective, which was like people that were out wrestling in the mud and you know smoking weed and drinking. And then there was the artist experience, the people that were backstage meeting with people who they had only seen perform on television or heard their record, but didn't know them in person. And as a person that produces things, you are really responsible for all three sets of experience. Literally the guests, the people that have either paid or taken the time out of their life to show up to be at a thing, the people who you're presenting, the artists or young people or young artists, and then is the people who are responsible for the technical production of the thing that you're producing. And you have to be thinking about each of these experiences because while the technical experience might be trash or at least not excellent, the artist might be having a great time and the audience might be too. And so you got to recognize that each of those three sets of experience hold value to you as the producer, as the organizer, um, but they don't have the same value for each of those audiences. Like the production team is probably very happy that the audience is happy. Is probably very happy that the musicians or the performers are happy. Um, if the production team is unhappy, I don't know that that matters so much to the audience as long as they're having the experience they signed up for. And I think that I'm glad he said that to me because it was really important as you think about this idea. Again, we're coming back to this thing of doing too much. Doing too much is also maybe being too critical. I had this realization maybe like 4 or 5 days ago that I will no longer talk down to myself or to my team about anything we do, not because what we do is perfect, but because whatever we did, it was the very best that we could do with what we have and the time that was available with the resources that are also available. Is if I'm chasing excellence, I'm never going to be happy. But also, if I'm not chasing excellence, I'm going to be stuck in mediocre or below average. So I say that like, don't be too critical of yourself. You will be your hardest critic. You also got to be your biggest champion because you're the person that's got to convince people to want to be a part of the thing that you're doing today, tomorrow, and forever until you're no longer doing it. So don't be overly critical of yourself. Don't be underly critical either. It's a balance. Remember, like, as the person that is the visionary or group that is the visionaries, being cognizant of what you aspire to, but not reaching that um, bring you down too much. You know, because you've got to move on to the next thing. You got to be ready for the next thing. Uh, I've been talking a lot about process and methodology that at least that I would suggest for how you approach developing things, growing things, telling your story, building your story. But I also think it's really important to understand that all of this is rooted in hip hop. This idea of creativity, remixing, um, putting your own spin on things is very much so a hip hop idea. Grandmaster Caz once said that he said, I don't think hip hop ever created anything, but it remixed everything. So this concept of remixing it in hip hop is a model for innovation. A remix is a reworking or adaptation or reinterpretation of an existing work, most often associated with music, but also applies to art, to literature, to film, and to culture. At its core, a remix involves taking existing material, a song, a visual artwork, idea, or story, then altering it or rearranging or adding new elements, beats, lyrics, visuals, context, creating something both recognizable and original, connected to the source, but with a fresh perspective or meaning. This is why I talked about the our scratch, sip, and paint. So sip and paint already exists. We added the scratch to it. The mixologist workshops on YouTube already exist. We added the DJ to it, so a turntablist and a mixologist. Thinking about how you create things that are still recognizable, but also represent an innovation. In hip hop, remix is a cultural practice rooted in DJing, where producers or DJs modify a track, changing the beat, expanding breaks, adding verses, or blending it with other sounds. Beyond music, the concept of remix has become a metaphor for for creativity itself, innovating by transforming what already exists into something new and personal. I share all this in part because if you are a creative leader, so much of what you are going to do over the course of your creative career is working to create original works. but that are still on some level or another recognizable. You will be remixing realities and methodologies that people recognize, but will recognize as uniquely yours as you create them. A great example of this in the real world, for those of you that are familiar with the history of hip hop, now more than 5 decades old, it's often credited as having begun as a park jam. Well, actually, beginning as a sorry, let me take that back. Not beginning as a park jam, beginning a concept called a park jam, where DJs would go out into the parks and basically do kind of what we might call today like peace in the streets jams, where they're trying to squash beef in communities that would bring out families and young people and adults. So this idea of a park jam goes back to the beginnings of hip hop, but it's remixed in the form of a festival like the Life is Living Park Jam that happens in Oakland, California, organized by one of my big brothers, Hadari Davis, where they take this whole idea of taking over a park. I think it's Little Bobby Hutton Park is the name of the park they work in, where they bring out the visual arts, the music, the performing arts, the health and wellness, and work to bring all these communities together to turn the park that is normally vacant for the most part into a hub of creativity and innovation and activity for the one day a year that they host this park jam. And it's called Life is Living in part because they wanted to connect arts and culture to the lives that people are living. And that's really valuable because they don't just call it Life is Living, they call it the Life is Living Park Jam. Just like the park jam that we host called Jazz and Blossoms builds on that idea again, recognizing the value of what was something spearheaded by DJs in the South Bronx of in New York City and throughout. Now there's organizations that do park jams all over the city, all over the country, all over the world. But all of us are building on this original concept, this original blueprint for how it is that public spaces could be activated through arts and culture to transform communities, to create safe spaces for young people and families to be a part of it. It's important to as you are building things that are rooted in things that inspired you to also give credit to those things that inspired you. Like I mentioned earlier, my marketing director, when I started Words Beats in Life, he was then the executive director of an organization called the Midnight Forum. And the Midnight Forum was the blueprint for the Words Beats in Life Academy. They were a hip hop after school program, the first one in Washington, D.C., focused on the core elements of hip hop. So they had DJ classes, graffiti classes, breaking classes, rap classes. Um, and we saw that blueprint and said, well, how could we, if we were going to do an after school program, how would ours be different? How would it build on what it is that they had done? And part of that answer was to think about how we brought young people into this larger creative community and celebrated their work. So for us, instead of having kind of the recital model where young people come to perform what it is they've learned for their families, we invited our young people to come and be a part of the events we were hosting, the b-boy jams, the paint jams, the concerts, the festivals, that those young people would just come out and perform in those spaces where the larger community would appreciate them and celebrate them in addition to their family. So that becomes one innovation. A second was thinking about how we would incorporate literature and things like hip hop theater that were beyond the original elements into how it is we would approach teaching the elements of hip hop culture and beyond. Um, but without the Midnight Forum, there literally is no Words Beats in Life. I had never even heard of a nonprofit until Dominic told me about the Midnight Forum at a creative economy career fair that we hosted as a part of the second Words Beats in Life conference at the University of Maryland. So he literally told me what he was doing, you know, out in the world because he's a University of Maryland alum and introduced this whole new idea to me. So I always, as long as I'm in this role, I'm going to give the Midnight Forum their credit for being the first and the blueprint that we then built on to be able to become the things that Words Beats in Life is today. And any questions? Any questions? Any questions? Looks like there's no questions, but I do have two guests. Thank you, two guests, for being here. Um, as I start to wrap up, because I'm a little over 30 minutes in, I just want to talk about innovation, branding, and storytelling. So building a brand that reflects your values, not just your aesthetics. What does that mean? So for us, the values of Words Beats in Life are creativity, opportunity, ownership, and innovation. What does that mean? So creativity is, of course, the arts. It is literally teaching the history, the culture, the traditions, but it's also working through culture to create opportunities for adult artists, for young people, and people around the country and around the world that we engage with. So creating opportunities, paid opportunities, not just exposure opportunities, has always been one of the things super important to us as a company. Recognizing the value of people owning the things that they create, and in some cases, co-owning with us, uh, has also been one of the things we've always valued in terms of the contracts we create, the the, the work for hire projects that we do, but also thinking about how is it that what we're doing is innovative? How is it that it's adding to the plethora of organizations, companies, individuals that are in the world doing this kind of work? And so recognizing everything that we do has to be looked at through these four values. What are the values that you have decided, either as an individual or as a collective, as a group, as a nonprofit or for profit? What are the values that you want to be reflected, um, as your brand? How do you convey that message internally and externally? We'll talk more about this on a future episode in more depth. Using innovation to solve problems, not just look new. So the academy is rooted in five outcomes: skill set mastery, employability, the pursuit of a post secondary education, community, and self mastery. To my knowledge, and Dominic might write something in the comments, to my knowledge, the two things that the Midnight Forum was focused on was skill set mastery and maybe employability. I feel like the things that we, in terms of young people getting good enough to be hired as artists to do the things that they were being taught. But I think that connecting what it is they were learning and the employment opportunities to the myriad of academic disciplines they could study in college or trade school or community college, I feel like that was an innovation on our part. The community piece, for us, the community piece is inviting in guest artists who become a part of the students' network, so that there's um, a bunch of adults who are interested in their development as creatives and supporting them in that. And then self mastery, I know is ours because I literally, uh, well, maybe I didn't create that term, but I introduced myself to it by combining two ideas: um, uh, knowledge of self, that's the self part, and then mastery. In youth development language, there's a concept called mastery and future. So I put those two things together to say, if you are a young person who has a skill, knows how to make money using that skill, knows the myriad of academic disciplines they can study connected to that skill, and a community to support them in the development and delivery of that skill, you as that young person become the driving force behind what's possible for your life. You are no longer the subject of the whims of history, but you are an active participant in what is possible for your present and your future. That is ultimately why we run the academy, is to help young people become masters of themselves, to master their own future. Last but not least, I want to just talk about aligning your personal brand with your organization's mission. I'll be honest, this is one of the places I've struggled the most. I've struggled the most in part because my personal brand, is not the organization's brand. My personal brand is probably standoffish, depending on when you met me, might be a jerk or some other terrible thing. But most people who talk about Words Beats Life have nothing but positive things to say. And in a lot of ways, that's because Words Beats Life is a reflection of the best in me and the best in the people that have chosen to work here at the different points over the last 23 years. And it's been built by a community of people. I'm the executive director. I get a lot of credit for the things that it does and has accomplished. Um, but that credit is really shared among a community of folks like Corey Stowers and Goldie Dean and Tone Johnson, uh, Two Tone Jones, Flex Matthews. I think I already said RBI. There's a lot of people who've been here in 23 years that have helped to build this brand and to promote these values and to achieve these outcomes. And so, as much as it's important to build something that reflects "quote unquote" your personal brand, recognize if you're building something with other people, it's reflecting your collective brand. And so, who you choose to collaborate with on an ongoing basis is going to be a reflection of what people think of you. And by you, I mean the company, and maybe you as an individual person. And so this is where it's really important to look to collaborate with people who you believe are going to help enhance what you're doing in the moment, but also in the long run. All right. Well, I went over my time a little bit. Hopefully, you enjoyed this conversation about doing too much. Again, my name is Mazi Mutafa, Executive Director of Words Beats and Life. This is Wednesday Wisdom. Please like, subscribe, share, comment. I'd love to get a comment uh, about this show or any of the things that have been shared. Hope you're having a wonderful Wednesday. Peace, y'all.